It is great to be here with Congressperson Khanna from California. I'll just start by saying that we have a Democratic politician on the stage at Bitcoin conference, and I have no idea how they're going to top it. I think this is probably the high water mark of the day, really. Congressman Khanna, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and I think that I just want to start off by letting you speak a little bit about how does Bitcoin, in your mind, intersect with progressive politics and progressive ideology?
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me. Bitcoin is about freedom. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin is about respecting human rights. If you have an authoritarian government that is suppressing individuals, then people who have Bitcoin are able to express themselves. If you have governments that are hyperinflating, then people who have Bitcoin have some economic security. And we've seen human rights activists and people like Navalny and others use Bitcoin for freedom. So to me, Bitcoin is the most progressive idea, which is empowering people with a way of standing up against powerful governments.
Great. I agree with everything that you just said. Yeah. What's interesting, earlier this week, the Nakamoto Project released some demographic research that the political support of Bitcoin is really more widespread than most people might think, even across the political spectrum. But sometimes it doesn't feel that way. So I'm just curious, in your view, is it the case that people at the elected positions in the Democratic Party are open and willing to consider Bitcoin, or is there still some resistance there?
There's an openness, and your book, Jason, has helped, but we need more education. I don't understand politicians who say they're opposed to Bitcoin. It's like saying you're opposed to semiconductors, or you're opposed to the laptop, or you're opposed to the iPhone. Right. I mean, Bitcoin is a technology. Right. And why wouldn't America want to lead in technology? Now, we can have a debate about what you do about it, what laws, what regulate, but how can you be opposed to it?
Right.
And it's also a fundamentally decentralizing technology. Of all the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin is, by definition, the most decentralized.
Absolutely.
There's not a group of people who control it. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of folks. Some people who don't even know the difference that there's cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin is one of them and the most decentralized and what it's used for and the fact that you can have faster payments and cheaper payments and then now you can transmit payments across the world in a cheap way and someone sitting in Nigeria could buy American stock with Bitcoin, which would be so hard to do if they had to go through Schwab or Fidelity. It's getting rid of the middlemen. It's actually getting rid of big bank institutions that are causing fees. People just need to understand it.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And we often hear, at least in this space, and I'm curious to get your take on this, that Bitcoin doesn't need politicians. Politicians need Bitcoin, and I would like to get I'd just like to get your response to that, because I feel like you're in a place where the politics and the nature of the political machine is now, for the first time in a real way, intersecting with Bitcoin in a meaningful way. So I'd like to get your take on that.
Well, in some sense, it's true. Bitcoin is a technology that's going to exist without politicians. But I want Bitcoin made in America. I want Bitcoin mined in America. I want Bitcoin to have an active presence in America. I want America to lead when it comes to Bitcoin. And I don't want all of it to go offshore. So if our regulatory environment isn't thoughtful, if we aren't taking the steps to make sure that Bitcoin has a place in America, it'll still go on, but it may not have as strong a presence in the United States.
Right.
And that's to our detriment. So the politicians do set some of the regulatory framework, and that's why it's important that we engage.
Right. Yeah. So along those lines, right, we have a government that is going to try to have some sensible, moderate regulation of a new industry. How does one balance, or how does one go trying to balance not stifling innovation, but having some common sense regulation that the industry probably needs? How does that look like?
I think people are open to common sense regulations to make sure that Bitcoin isn't transferred in ways that are engaged in money laundering, and now you actually have it on the blockchain, and you can trace it if it's used for nefarious purposes. You can sanction Bitcoin if it's used in illegal ways, and people understand that you want to have some regulation on that. And we want to make sure that you have the energy used for Bitcoin mining can come from clean energy. It's a huge opportunity, and to use the waste, energy waste, so you're not increasing fossil fuel emissions by using Bitcoin. And that's something that government can do. But the bottom line is that you want America to lead when it comes to Bitcoin, and make sure that the appreciation of it is something that benefits the United States, and that we're setting the financial standards.
Great. So over the course of the past 2 days and into this afternoon, we're going to hear about a lot of executive orders or proposals for executive orders. But I know that there's some bipartisan legislation that has popped up from time to time in Congress. How far are we away, in your mind, of getting something passed that is actually a bipartisan approach, sensible regulation, and some sort of term defining that everybody can agree with and knows what the rules of the game are? How far away are we from that?
Well, I've supported 2 bipartisan pieces of legislation. One, a Republican bill by Patrick McHenry, FIT 21, that applies not just to Bitcoin, but to all cryptocurrencies, to say that we need regulatory clarity. We need to say what the SEC can do, what the CFTC can do, and we need to make sure that the software developers aren't caught up in being penalized. And that passed with 70-plus Democrats in the House. We now need it to pass the Senate. And I voted to overturn SAB 121. I don't know how many folks followed it, but that would basically make it hard for banks to hold Bitcoin because they'd have to show it as a liability. They don't have to do that with any other asset class. And so I was one of 20-some Democrats who said, no, we don't. SAB 121 doesn't make sense, and I voted to actually overturn the president's veto of that.
Right. Great. Yeah. I think people here are paying attention to that, for sure. Congressman Khanna, earlier this month you hosted a crypto roundtable where you invited industry leaders and other politicians from the left. And I want to get your read on that. How did that, what was the motivation behind you doing that, and what was the intention, and how did that go?
Well, it was that America shouldn't rest on its laurels. We have the best financial system in the world, and so sometimes we don't appreciate how important Bitcoin is in other parts of the world. There are many other countries which have currency that's inflating. The dollar is a great currency still. So we don't have as much of a need, but there are other countries that do have a desperate need for it. And they have a desperate need because of authoritarian governments. But if we don't have Bitcoin, if we don't have cryptocurrencies, we're going to cede leadership in the financial innovation of the 21st century. Why would we do that? Why? Yeah. We need to be the leaders. This is a payment that's going to be cheaper. It's going to be faster. It's going to have the ability to move a few cents across the world without the fees. It's going to make us more connected in a global society. I mean, all the Democrats who preach that we don't want to be isolationists, well, isn't rejecting cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin being isolationist because the rest of the world is using it?
Absolutely.
So this is actually connecting to the rest of the world. So the conference was saying, let America lead when it comes to the instruments of financial innovation. And you have the Fed payment now, FedNow, and you have Zelle with the banks. I don't want a monopoly of the Fed and the banks deciding how to have instantaneous payments. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are competitive alternatives so that we don't have monopoly power. I thought the Democrats were opposed to monopoly power.
Me too. That's great. So as we look forward, there's a lot of people in the Bitcoin space who claim to be single-issue voters, and I'm not one of them. I'm infamously not one of them. There's other things I care about. So if I go to your website, there's a lot of policies that you and I agree on. But a lot of the other Democrats where I look and I don't see things that I agree with everything else except for their Bitcoin or crypto policy. How do we get more people at the grassroots level energized or talking to their representatives to actually get that message to go from the bottom up to say, you know, we can't keep voting for you if you have these damaging policies on crypto or Bitcoin? How does that happen in your vision of it? Like,
well, make your voice heard. I know Bitcoiners aren't shy, and I know you're bold. I mean, be on social media. Talk to your members of Congress. Talk to them on social media. Talk to them in person. And make the simple case of what this technology is and why you care about it, because of freedom, because of making it easy to transport payments, because it's a hedge against inflation, and just help educate people of what it is. It's a technology.
Right. Great. And so maybe we'll sort of wrap it up with this final question, which is on dangerous ice here. But do you think that in the future, if you held another crypto roundtable, somebody like the vice president might be willing to attend?
Well, I hope so. I think there's a new generation of politicians in both parties who have values that support innovation, who support more freedom for individuals, who support decentralization of economic opportunity, and who understand the value of Bitcoin and of many cryptocurrencies and want America to lead. And we are people who champion builders, who champion entrepreneurs, who champion innovation, who want America to have that innovation. And I'm going to make that case, and I'm going to work in a bipartisan way, because this is important for the country. And what I would love is for the next Bitcoin conferences, not to have Republican or Democrat, but to just have Americans embrace this, because this is the right thing for America.
Great. Appreciate that. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I think okay, long time no see. A second Democratic sitting representative here on the main stage of Bitcoin. I just can't possibly imagine how it's going to get any better than this today. Thank you, Congressman Wiley Nickel. There is a distinction a little bit between you and the last person that was out here, right? So I think that Congressman Khanna leans a little bit more liberal, and you would consider yourself a Democrat, but more moderate. So can you just at least introduce that as an idea and how it intersects with your Bitcoin view?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point that is important to make is, in the Democratic Party, we have a wide range of opinions, but when we're talking about digital assets, it runs the gamut from left to right to center, and the future of Bitcoin and crypto has to be a bipartisan future. That's the only way we're going to ever get anything done in Washington, is if we work together on this in a bipartisan way. That's been my focus in Congress when it's been passing FIT 21, the digital assets market structure bill. This I think, folks, by the way, in Congress we have done almost nothing. Least productive Congress in our nation's history. We've done must-pass bills like the budget, the debt ceiling, supporting Ukraine and Israel, but crypto has the chance to be the big bipartisan thing we do in this Congress. So that's been our focus.
Great, yeah. And I've always said in the space that Bitcoin provides maybe one of the only opportunities to actually have an important substantive discussion that isn't about a political football, right? Going back and forth and playing gamesmanship in that way. So I can appreciate this attempt to bridge that political gap and work on both sides of the aisle. And so to that event, or to that idea, what kind of support are you seeing in Congress as you sort of walk the halls and you're talking about these digital assets and Bitcoin and the promise that it has? What kind of reactions are you getting from your colleagues in Congress?
It's been great. It's been the first time Congress has never ever voted on crypto in our nation's history. We're operating off of a 100-year-old securities law, so it was a big deal that we passed Fit 21 with 71 Democrats. I was part of a group, including Khanna, you heard from, organizing to make sure we kept this as a bipartisan issue. It was a big deal that we were able to get those Democrats on board. But the job for everybody here, it's about education. If we educate folks in Congress on these issues, we're going to get more and more support.
That's great. And I think, like we were talking about with Congressman Khanna, right? A common sense approach to legislation, to regulation, to make the space work, function properly, not hurt people, but not overstepping to stifle innovation is really the key. And so, in your view, how are the ways that Bitcoin can actually work towards making something more transparent, fair, and open for your constituents?
Yeah, no, I mean, crypto has the chance to totally democratize finance, turning dictatorships into democracies, to empowering folks to have control of their money, to bring down costs, to increase speed of transactions. This is revolutionary technology, which we need to embrace. And and I look at, I'm here in Nashville. I used to work for Al Gore, a great Tennessean. We had the internet. Everybody was behind it. This revolutionary new technology, and the folks who are against Web3 and crypto, they're going to look back in 10 years and just be like, "What were you thinking?"
Right. I mean, you can imagine somebody proposing that we ban the internet from, in the early '90s or something like that, right? It doesn't make sense. And if you ban it here, or if you try to stifle it here, it's going to go someplace else, right? And so one of the things that Congressman Khanna mentioned is like using more sustainable green energy, right? So if you make the mistake of banning it in America, you don't know where that mining power is going to go, right? And it's probably going to be a lot less clean than it is here. So these kinds of unintended consequences where these politicians saying, well, we should do this or do that, we need to think through all of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know that you are into the Bitcoin space, into the crypto space. You want to advocate for common sense sort of legislation, regulation around the space. So what are some of the things that you're doing, hopefully making connections with people, across the political aisle? But yeah, tell me about some of that.
Yeah, no, obviously we've got the former president coming on the stage. This is a big issue. We had a total reset of the presidential election just less than a week ago now with Kamala Harris. And we've been working hard since then to get a reset from Vice President Harris and the administration on crypto. So something newsworthy and noteworthy. I've just led a letter of Democratic officials to the DNC advocating for a new approach to digital assets policy. This is a letter with 28 Democrat electeds, including 14 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, including Roe, asking for 4 things from the DNC and the next Democratic nominee for president. Pro-asset digital language in the party's platform, selecting a vice presidential candidate sophisticated in digital asset policy, selecting a pro-innovation SEC chair, and engaging with the industry in a meaningful way. Those are the things that I think are...
Yeah.
And I'm very optimistic. We have been working hard behind the scenes, having senior level meetings with folks, with the Office of the Vice President, with the campaign, to get a reset. Vice President Harris understands this issue. Her husband is someone I know who gets it, and I think we're going to get to see a reset, which will be a big deal in the space. And again, my hope is that folks who come out of this conference understand that the future has to be a bipartisan one. If we politicize the issue, we will just poison the well for 10 years in Congress, and it's going to be really hard for folks who are pro, innovation like me to get things done.
That's great. Yeah, no, I appreciate that effort, right? And I do think it speaks to this idea that the polarization in the crypto and Bitcoin space can often seem a lot more exaggerated than it really is behind the scenes, right? On social media, or if you hyper-focus on one or two politicians on the left in particular, you might get the sense that everybody on the left doesn't like Bitcoin, but that's certainly not the case. So the efforts like this, where you're actually making some demands and there's a group of lawmakers behind it, is great news, and I'm happy to hear it. Yeah. So more generally, when we think about this bipartisan approach, which, as you said, right, we're going to hear all about these executive orders, but things like that don't last, right? So we need legislation. And are you finding that people on the right side of the aisle are willing to work with you on these innovative technologies too?
No, it's been, again, one of the biggest things we've done in this Congress so far in a bipartisan way. We've got, we know that Schumer and the Senate Democrats are very committed to getting this done. I think we're going to see some news out of Washington in the next few weeks. So, there's a very good collaborative approach on this issue. And I think for folks who are at this conference, it's so important to continue to make that push to educate Democrats and Republicans in Congress and at all levels about the amazing transformational nature of this technology.
That's great, yeah. And, there's people who are in the audience here or maybe watching at home who maybe they themselves are more conservative or Republican, but they live in a Democratic district, right? So you are allowed to contact your representative and voice your support of Bitcoin, and you should be doing this no matter whose district you're in and who's representing you in Congress. So just another plug for making your voice heard. Speak to your congresspeople and your elected representatives so that they know how important it is for you and the people around you, right, for all of these ideals. So you think about the political landscape now, and again, you said a lot's changed in the last week, and that's an understatement, right? But in my mind, I had one reaction when Donald Trump came out in support of Bitcoin. I feel like it's great to have a presidential candidate in support of Bitcoin, but of course I worried about the backlash against that, right, from people on the left who would just dismiss it out of hand just because Trump supported it, and that might be a reality that we have. So what is your feeling on the importance of liberals, progressives, Democratic moderates to just stand up for Bitcoin in the light of Donald Trump supporting it?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to be here right on the same stage, making a progressive case for Bitcoin and for crypto. But you're going to hear from Donald Trump later, and I think it's worth pointing out his own words on this issue. In 2019, Donald Trump said, and I quote, "I am not a fan of Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies which are not money." He said all the bad talking points. He said they facilitate unlawful behavior, including drugs and illegal activities. And that's right. And in 2021. And folks, in 2021, he called it a scam. That's right. Folks, I can tell you one thing, and I want to say this as politely and respectfully as I can. Donald Trump was president for 4 years. He did nothing on this issue, and right now I can tell you he is totally full of shit.
So that's very brave of you. And you know what? As Bitcoiners, I think that we can respect some bravery. And I do think that people would say, yeah, thank you. Donald Trump, like every other politician, is allowed to change his mind on this, right? And you all need to remember that that's exactly what's happening, right? And that's okay, because we have people now who are actually talking about Bitcoin and digital currencies in a really productive way. And if Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket talking about Bitcoin, and a lot of the Democrats who aren't at the top but are actually talking about it, that's really good news for me, right? I think that we need a bottom-up approach and actually convince the rest of the Democrats, and there are many who are supporting what you're doing, convince the rest of them too, right? And so I think that that's really what our focus needs to be on.
And I wanted to talk to everybody here because I think it's so important that, again, we're gonna have folks who want to use this issue for their own benefit. But if you're looking long term, you've got to make sure we keep this as a bipartisan issue. And I agree. I agree too. We've got what I think are 1 million single issue voters on this issue. Yeah. So presidential candidates, and Kamala Harris included, need to make their position known.
Right.
They need to come out with strong messaging. And I think we're at a reset on that, and I'm very optimistic about what we're going to hear.
Yeah, that's great. No, and I do think that we should be excited about a reset and a continued dialogue. Right? It's not as if the discussion is over, and there's a lot more work to be done. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Next year, we are bringing the Bitcoin conference to the American West, Las Vegas. The brightest minds in the world will converge to deliver Bitcoin history. Buy your tickets now at b.tc/conference/2025.